It's dark in here. Hello. It is May the 11th, and this, of course, is Monday, and that means we have Tuesday and Wednesday, and then we have your AP Euro exam on Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday at 4 o'clock. Log on at 3:30. Take the exam at 4 o'clock like everybody else around the world is doing at the exact same time. So what are we going to do this week in this class? Well, let's see. We have about 130 years to cover. And also we have this exam thing hanging over our head. And so basically I'm going to make reference to what we still need to cover over the next 2 days. Wednesday, I'm going to come back on and just go over again the process for the DBQ. After that, hay's in the barn, and you guys will go out there on your own, and you'll be fine. I am uncomfortable sitting in the dark like this and looking at myself in the dark, especially the two furry creatures behind me. So I'll be back. Now, well, we have the French Revolution to quickly go over, and I do mean quickly. Now, if you notice, this morning on Canvas, I sent you 2 videos. They're pretty good, 2 crash course videos. They're also pretty good. They're good for review, to put things in line. And I watched most of both of them. They don't take that much time. Let me heavily recommend that you take the time to go over those. And to be real honest, crash course through the rest of the 19th century. We'll try to cover the rest of the 19th century tomorrow. But today we will talk about Napoleon, the French Revolution, and Napoleon, in as concise a time period as possible. I mean, the French Revolution is a major turning point in political history. Actually, a lot of history courses, European history courses, are dated before and after the French Revolution. That's the midpoint. Or the death of Napoleon, both of which we're talking about today. But anyway, the French Revolution, what caused the French Revolution? Just like everything else, money. The French government was unable to cover its running expenses, unable to pay its debts, and in the richest country and the strongest country in all of Europe, it couldn't come up with revenue to function. Then you add on top of it the terrible administration of the country. Louis XVI was a bumbling fool. And the way things were set up is very difficult to change. And suddenly it all just came crashing down. Oh yes, throw in a couple of nasty winters. Remember, we're still talking about the little ice age here, just like our friend on Crash Course talks about. Bad harvest. It's the economy, stupid. And suddenly you have people storming the Bastille. Louis XVI, though, once again, always so willing to do exactly the wrong thing at exactly the wrong time, assembles an army outside of Paris. And remember, unlike today, when we look at the United States Army or the National Guard and think, oh, they've come to help. Back then, people knew that when the king called up the military and there was no war going on, what was coming was going to be a thrashing, that the army was coming in to crush some sort of revolt or whatever. And so, yeah, they collected weapons and they stormed the Bastille. And then all sorts of acts of atrocities began with, beheading the mayor of the Bastille, walk around with heads on pikes and these kind of things. And conditions, kept going from bad to worse. Louis XIV was taken into custody along with Marie Antoinette by, remember, the Poussin, the French fishwomen, who not only took Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI into custody, they beheaded the poor palace guard with pocket knives. They used how do you saw off somebody's head with a pocket knife? I mean, that is just grisly. Of course, these fishwomen were quite adept too, but anyway. And so then Louis was stuck in, was placed under house arrest in the what is now called the Tuileries Palace, the old palace of the French king, what is now the Louvre. And he was under house arrest, which wasn't too bad. And for a while, he tried to feign like, oh yeah, this French Revolution, what a great idea. But things were churning and boiling over. Other people looked at this, other countries looked at this. And once again, this thing called the Great Fear. The Great Fear, hopefully you saw this on your test last weekend. The Great Fear was a panic that spread through the ruling classes. What if these rich people, if these poor people actually figure out the simple math that there's a lot more of them than there are of us, and if they wanted to, they could rise up and take whatever they wanted. And anyway, Louis XVI then tried to escape, and he got, as you know from the test again, he escaped. He made two big mistakes. One, he writes this terrible note condemning the French Revolution. Two, he gets caught. Yeah, he and the royal family, as you know, dressed up as servants, slipped out of the house at the middle of the night, headed to the Austrian border, and got within 20 miles of the border, and were recognized and caught. Yeah. So anyway, but in the meantime, this new Constituent Assembly was trying to set up a government. And keep in mind that this new government was supposed to be about liberty, equality, fraternity. And what it was about creating a government of the bourgeoisie, for the bourgeoisie, and by the bourgeoisie. The rich people who weren't nobles. Yeah. So keep in mind also this French Revolution didn't include women, although the French Revolution did make getting a divorce easier, which Napoleon's going to turn right around and do away with, but that's okay. It's not okay, but it's what happened. So, the economic policies of the country were reformed. Metric system came out of the French Revolution. The Capillary law during the French Revolution outlawed labor organization. But keep in mind that this new assembly the French government owed lots of money, and the new assembly did not repudiate the debt. And I know you're saying repudiate, I remember that word. It means to simply say the debt doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, the assembly weren't going to do that because a lot of that debt was owed to the assembly itself. And so, yeah. They tried to pay the debt by seizing Roman Catholic Church property, which is very valuable, and selling it. So the new government also basically declared war on the Roman Catholic Church. They passed a law called the Civil Constitution of the Clergy, which basically made the Roman Catholic Church and all of its offices subordinate to the new secular government. And also tried to push on to the people this new, see me touching my face, this new religion, quasi-religion, called the cult of the supreme being. Probably that was the biggest mistake of the new assembly. The peasants in France had been loyal Roman Catholics literally since their days of the Roman Empire. And now, oh no, you've got to change now. Yeah, that doesn't work. So there were a couple of atrocities. For example, when the emigres, these are nobles, your nobles from France who slipped out of France to go and try and recruit help from the crown heads of Europe. And they got the Declaration of Pillnitz, which said that, it is the duty of all monarchs to come to France and restore order. They came back waving that in front of the face of the assembly. And instead of making the assembly cow down, it made the assembly mad. And they declared war on Austria and anybody else. So Louis XVI, he kept trying to find some way out of this situation where he got to keep his head. But the whole escape thing really kind of threw a monkey wrench into that. So then there was the September Massacre, where during one incident in September 1792, a mob in Paris dragged out 1,200 royalists, people loyal to the old regime, priests, etc., nuns, members of the nobility, and dragged them out into the street and butchered them right there. This was called the September Massacre. Yes, sans-culotte, men without pants, sans-culotte. This was the new group, the masses who refused to wear the old knee breeches. And so, yeah, they became known as the sans-culotte. So, and of course, the emergence of the Jacobin Party. Yes, the Jacobin Party, you do recall. The Jacobins who were there was the Jacobins. Remember, the Jacobins are radicals. Yes, remember the term radical. Radical means an extreme liberal who wants change so badly that they will resort to violence to acquire that change. And so, yeah, they were called the Jacobin Party. And they are the ones who will be responsible for a lot of the atrocities of the French Revolution. And they are the ones who make the rest of the world afraid of the French Revolution. Anyway, then this guy, Edmund Burke, wrote Reflections on the Revolution, which was he's a British guy. He writes about the French Revolution, being a very bad thing. And that becomes the guidebook for knowing about the French Revolution for decades to come. Anyway, the French Revolution will cause a great backlash of conservatism across Europe. Say again. French Revolution, in the long and short of it, is going to cause a great backlash of conservatism all across Europe. I mean, because you have all these common people laying their hands on their betters, and that just frightened the people of Europe. Well, the people in power in Europe. And the French Revolution will be a long time before Europe as a whole begins to accept popular protest. A long time. Anyway, the revolution brought an end to enlightened absolutism in Eastern Europe. Yeah, when the French Revolution hit, everybody went, wow. All those Enlightenment ideas that look so good on paper, they're not so good anymore. Yeah. Roman numerals don't count anymore, but for what it's worth, I'm 2/3 of the way through this chapter on the French Revolution. The French Revolution actually caused the end of liberal movements in Europe. With the Third Estate, not the Third Estate so much as the Jacobin Party in control of the French government, they set up this thing called the Committee of Public Safety with, I remember, you got to know, Maximilien Robespierre, George Danton, who was the Minister of Justice, heading this Committee of Public Safety, which was about anything but safety. It was about stamping out any and all resistance to the French Revolution. And so the members of the committee wanted to create what they called a republic of virtue, where it wasn't good enough to just be against the monarchy and for the revolution. You've got to be all in for the revolution. And so they tried to change everything in France. An attack, for example, against prostitution, because they saw that as related to an aristocratic society, because it was the members of the aristocratic society who used the members of the poor society for this. Women, remember that women originally had been very heavily involved in the beginning of the French Revolution. And then, as the revolution went on, they were excluded. They could not wear the cockade, for example, the new French Revolution colors. Olympe de Gouges, who had written Declaration of the Rights of Woman, she made so much noise that they eventually executed her. Okay. So, talked about the cult of supreme being, Robespierre, little loudmouth. The Reign of Terror will reach its highest point in the summer of 1793. And basically, the Reign of Terror really begins with the execution of Marie Antoinette. After the death of Marie Antoinette, it's like the place goes nuts for about 11 months. It's called the Reign of Terror. You could be executed for complaining about the price of bread. You could be executed for casting, having doubt as to whether or not the revolution was going to be victorious over its multiple enemies. And eventually what happened to the Reign of Terror was like any other extremist movement. It eventually just burns itself out. Once again, you cannot sustain something positive on the back of something negative, which is what the Reign of Terror was. Reign of Terror was, let's go out and find people who are disloyal and kill them, and then it's going to be fine. Well, eventually, you kill too many people. It's allergies, guys. Kill too many people, make the wrong people unhappy, and yeah, there it is. So, Danton was executed, and eventually Robespierre himself made a speech in the assembly that got him into the soup, and he too was executed. His execution will signal the end of the reign of terror. And then will begin the backlash against the reign of terror, the so-called Thermidorian reaction. Thermidor is a reference to the month of July. Reaction, that means a backlash, a revenge against the members of the bourgeoisie, the Jacobins, who had caused so much pain and suffering over the last 11 months. So-called bands of Jesus went around exacting revenge on people who had abused the clergy. Refractory priests returned to the country, and also there was a genuine return to Catholicism. Okay, and basically then after that you go from the Committee of Public Safety to this thing called the Directory. The Directory was the new form of government. It consisted of a two-house legislature, and its executive branch was a 5-man committee. And this group had a reputation for corruption, and they were very dictatorial in their rulings. And but also during this time, the peasants were able to, they were given the land they had worked on for centuries. The Thermidorians repealed the price controls on food. However, that resulted in just a skyrocketing food prices. There were food riots had to be put down by force. And then, of course, the Directory held elections to see who would take power. And unfortunately for the Directory, the results of those elections placed members of the nobility and royalists back in the power, which the Directory said, we can't have that. And so they call up Napoleon Bonaparte and they say, look, we need you to take care of a situation for us. And Napoleon comes in and he disperses the crowd with, as it said, a whiff of grape shot. And so, yeah, the Directory now depended upon Napoleon Bonaparte to stay in power, and they're going to regret that because Napoleon Bonaparte will quickly realize he doesn't need the Directory because it's so popular. And you know what, guys? We just finished the French Revolution. Do yourself a favor and look at that crash course on the French Revolution, just like the one over Napoleon that I'm about to delve into slightly here. Napoleon Bonaparte, once again, not French, but rather Corsican, entered the French army as a second lieutenant of the artillery. And Napoleon is a son of the French Revolution, meaning had there not been a French Revolution, there would have been no Napoleon. It provided him opportunity. It provided a man of non-white ethnicity to rise up in the ranks of the French in a very racist society. So anyway, Napoleon comes to power, decides that the Directory is a pain and actually gets rid of them. And under Napoleon, I mean, it's really ironic. So before the French Revolution, France is an absolute monarchy. And with Napoleon, they're going to get one back. Napoleon was an absolute monarch. Obviously, he was an emperor. He was the king. He was emperor. Anyway, and Napoleon, you know, most AP Euro exams do not talk about Napoleon's military victories, although they were impressive. They do talk about the changes he brought. Some of the changes were in line with the ideas of the French Revolution. For example, allowing the Roman Catholic Church to function again. Although, and listening to that video this morning, something I didn't know, Napoleon was later excommunicated by the Roman Catholic Church because he had this nasty habit of snatching up Roman Catholic Church property. Yeah, they didn't like that. But anyway, so yeah, he did say Roman Catholic Church can operate, and he made that's fine. Whereas the old government had suppressed the Roman Catholic Church. Then he turns around and starts snatching up Catholic Church property. You say, "What, Mr. Orton? What are you rambling about?" Well, here's the point of the matter. It can be argued that Napoleon both upheld the ideas of the French Revolution in many facets, and of course, he also did away with them. It can be argued either way, really. It's just a matter of how you make the argument. For example, Napoleon's struck down all ranks, nobility, all that kind of business. Continued that. That was the idea of the French Revolution. Except the French Revolution had freed slaves, as you know, in all parts of the empire. Well, Napoleon said, we need sugar production. And the most efficient way to get sugar production is to have those slaves in Haiti go back to work. So, sorry, fellas, but your vacation has been revoked. And yeah, so Napoleon had his enemies executed, So, but Napoleon, like I said, did reach an accord, a peace treaty with the Roman Catholic Church, because Napoleon knew what the old French Revolution government didn't know, that the Roman Catholic Church was a political entity. The Roman Catholic Church, a lot of people supported that, and he needed their support. And so he kind of made a peace treaty with them. Although the clergy under the Roman Catholic Church did have to swear an oath of loyalty to the state, Napoleon passed the Code de Napoleon, which at its best standardized the law codes, not only across France, but all of Napoleon-controlled Europe. The same law became effective for everybody, the Code de Napoleon. A law code which was actually so workable that it is still the law code that serves as the basis of many countries' law codes to this very day. Yeah, not just in Europe, but also places like Vietnam, which was once a French colony, or Haiti, or Tahiti. It's the basis. They've added change since then. It provided the Napoleonic Code, though, officially said, sorry, women, you're class number 2, legal minors. Outlawed labor organization, but it standardized laws across France. Napoleon did have his enemies. As it says there, he was attacked. Somebody threw a bomb at him, and he used that attack to say, I need to be emperor to safeguard the French people. He crowned himself emperor, and then went to war over all the rest of Europe. And Napoleon did. At one point in time, Napoleon will own or be allied to all of Europe, including Russia, except for England. Yeah. But Napoleon then tries to put into place this thing called the Berlin and Milan decrees, the Continental System, he called it, and in which the idea was that Napoleon's France would replace the commerce. Instead of trading with Britain, you trade with France. Problem was, Britain could deliver all the things that the countries of Europe wanted. The French didn't have it, couldn't do it. And so, for example, Russia wanted to sell the British trees, sell them timber that they could use for building their ships. And that's why the Russians dropped out of the Continental System. And then in turn, that's why Napoleon decided to invade the Russia of his old friend, Tsar Alexander I. Anyway, and we all know what happened to Napoleon's invasion of Russia. You do know, don't you, Miss Harris? I'm waiting. Yeah, it was a big, yeah, it fell on its face. I've heard differing theories about the role that the winter played in defeating Napoleon. I've heard other theories that actually the winter wasn't that bad. But then again, you got to remember Napoleon took an army of some 600,000 men a full 3,000 miles away from their base of operations. And armies have to eat. Army travels on its stomach. And Napoleon's army, yeah, basically it wasn't, Napoleon was not very good at provisioning armies. And I'm talking again about Napoleon military, which is never a subject matter for an AP Euro exam. You just need to know that Napoleon went to Russia and got his head handed to him. And after that was it. It broke the back of Napoleon. Not long after that, Napoleon was defeated at the Battle of Nations, and and then Napoleon, as you know, was placed in exile in 1815. Is that right? 1814. Somewhere there. Yeah, Napoleon was placed in exile on the little tiny island of Elba, which is in the Mediterranean. I guess they didn't think he would try to escape from Elba. They didn't know Napoleon very well. He did escape from Elba. And when he got back to France, he basically stepped on the beach, said, "Whoever wants to, shoot me right now." And instead of shooting him, the French army rallied behind him, and suddenly Napoleon, for about 100 days, is the emperor. He is the bony man again, when he's finally defeated at Waterloo, as you know. And after Waterloo, they said, yeah, we're going to still not kill you, Napoleon, but we are going to send you a little bit away to the island of St. Helena, which is, the island of St. Helena is like 2,000 miles of water. It's in the South Atlantic. And Napoleon was going nowhere. Yeah, there's a British military base there, a British naval base. And Napoleon died in 1820 of stomach cancer, was the official cause, although the real cause of his death has been debated. Okay. That leads us to this thing called the Congress of Vienna. Congress of Vienna was the first time that the nations of Europe had put their heads together to basically try to keep the peace afterwards. Remember that prior to the Napoleonic Wars and during the Napoleonic Wars, Europe had been through centuries of almost constant warfare. Now, not the kind of warfare we see in World War I and World War II, but still warfare that was draining. And so Congress of Vienna wants to establish a Europe that will promote peace and also safeguard against France. So the goals of the Congress of Vienna: one, stamp out the ideas of the French Revolution. Can't have that. And two, to redraw the map of Europe to try and maintain a lasting peace. They weren't interested in punishing France, which is where they will be smarter than the guys after the Treaty of Versailles, which you don't get to study. But yeah, they didn't want to punish France because they didn't want to create a power vacuum. And they said they just wanted to make sure France didn't cause trouble anymore. And actually, they were fairly successful. Much of the fact that from 1815 to 1914, Europe is at relative peace. Much of it is owed to the Congress of Vienna. It set up a balance of power that will not be upset pretty much for the rest of the century. Yeah. Okay, which leads us to Romanticism. Will you get me another one of these, please? I don't have my refrigerator here. Although that'd be a good idea. So, what is Romanticism? Romanticism is an artistic literary movement that basically does this to the Enlightenment. It is a reaction against the Enlightenment. Remember, we just spent a whole lot of time talking about the Enlightenment, how it was all about logic and all this kind of business. Well, Romanticism is going to come back and say, you know what? That's not true for everything. Romanticism is about that part of the human experience, the human universe that is not logical. That being love, that being hate, that being the macabre, that being the supernatural, the beauty of nature, the wonder and awe of nature and those kind of things. The Romantic period will go from about 1780 to 1830. And I will tell you that after the Romantic period, artistic periods get shorter and shorter and shorter. But yeah, the Romantic period urged a return to religion and also like the art and architecture of the medieval age. For example, Parliament and Big Ben. If you've ever seen pictures of Parliament, it looks like a medieval castle, has the spires and things like that. Well, Parliament was built in the 19th century, or the Houses of Parliament, built in the 19th century, purposefully to look like houses, look like medieval structures, something out of Game of Thrones or something. I've been watching that. It's mind candy. I want to be a Dothraki. Anyway, I'm just kidding. I don't like Dothrakis. Rather savage. I just like the word Dothraki. Anyway, they urge a return to religion, like the art and architecture of the medieval age. Romantics like dreams, hallucinations, and other things that were not logical. My good friend Charles Dickens was a romantic, for example. Immanuel Kant, who wrote Critique of Pure Reason and Critique of Practical Reason, Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative, which said that categorical imperative was the philosophy, the moral philosophy of the age of Romanticism, meaning that the basic question is, what am I allowed to do? What is good and what is evil? Well, and the categorical imperative simply says that it would be considered, it's okay to do it if everybody else can do it too. But if one person in the world can't do what you want to do, then you can't do it. Categorical imperative. So, romantic literature, like I said, The Last of the Mohicans by James Fenimore Cooper, who was not a European writer. Samuel Taylor Coleridge, William Blake, they were romantic. And of course, your hero and mine, Charles Dickens, Lord Byron, you recall him. We've already talked about Lord Byron, that nut job that goes off to fight in the War for Greek independence and gets himself killed. Almost all German romantics wrote at least one novel. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. He's the guy that wrote Faust. Faust is about this guy that sells his soul to the devil. Probably the best known of all the German romantic writers. I have a bit of a sore throat this morning. And then there was the subject of romantic religion. And the new faith that occurs in England during this time, there are actually two of them. First, there's the Methodist, founded by a guy named John Wesley. Methodism is a prototype romantic faith because it is so emotional. If you've ever been to a Catholic service and then to a Methodist service, miles apart. Catholic services, very staid, very disciplined, very dignified. Methodists and Baptists, and their baptism and Methodism are both part of the Romantic movement. Let's see. There was also, after the Thermidor reaction, the Great Revival of the Catholic Church in France, a genuine return to Catholicism, as you already know. Let's see. And I think that's pretty much it. Most of it is details. Please look at, once again, those two videos. And I'm gonna stop here. And tomorrow we'll talk about the age of conservatism. We'll talk about the Industrial Revolution. We'll try to finish out the 19th century. And because we covered a lot of that in the third quarter. And then Wednesday, we will talk about writing the paper, the 10 points again. Okay. All right. And so with that, I'm going to bid you adieu and hope that you have a good day. I don't know. The weather is just so strange. Today is like a day in March, or early April, rather than mid-May. But strange things. Bye, guys. Have a great day. I will see you later.